I am Andreas Stanowski and publisher at Continental Publishing in Germany. I recently had the pleasure of speaking with Swami Atmarupanada, a monk of the Ramakrisha Order. In his already 54 years as a monk, he built and led several Vedanta centers in the USA and Puerto Rico. For more than a year, he has been in charge of the Centre Vedantique Ramakrisha near Paris. We talked about a topic that has been on my mind for many years, about the fact that people create and shape the world and their own lives by believing what their culture and social environment suggest to them, without questioning it. We ourselves create the worlds we live in by thinking in a certain way, believing in certain things, and pursuing certain goals. This fact should give us hope. If enough people would change their thinking and the way they understand themselves and the world, humanity could learn from the current crisis and human civilization could take a positive turn. Swami Atmarupanada, our thinking, what we believe in, what we desire, determines how we act and how we live. Would a Vedantin agree with this statement?
Yes, Vedanta would certainly agree with this statement. To paraphrase Swami Vivekananda, the whole universe is habit. And habit means habit of thought. Habit of action comes from habit of thought. In fact, the Vedantic view is that the universe is the thought of the creator, the thought of Brahma, the thought of the cosmic mind. The modern scientific approach, which has its value, we're not against science in any way, but there is a distinction. The modern scientific approach is you start with matter, because it's assumed that matter is primary, that out of matter come life forms. When matter combines in certain combinations, you get life, and that life goes on complexifying until you get to consciousness, and consciousness goes on complexifying until you get to human consciousness, where self-reflection, etc., is possible. The Vedantic view is just the opposite, that from pure consciousness, which has nothing to do with process, has nothing to do with doing anything, it has nothing to do with thinking. It's just pure luminous awareness, the light which illuminates thought processes and physical processes and everything else, that is primary. Within that, there appears sense of duality, I and other. And from that develops the thinking process, the cognition, and from that develops in the cosmic mind, it develops the universe at an ideal stage, or in the sense of idea, ideal in the sense of idea, the idea stage, and from that it manifests as a physical universe. So you come from consciousness as primary down to matter. And from that standpoint, thought is more important than matter. We perceive the world the way we perceive it because of habits of thought. All of human civilization is based on habits of thought. We have the judicial system that we have in whatever country because of habits of thought, the way that we think about what justice is and what it should be. We have the economic systems that we have in the world now and at other times because of the way we think, what we value, how we think of money, how we think of economic transactions and so forth. All of that is based on thinking. Political systems we have, everything is based on human thinking. The human society is a manifestation of human thought. Our usual way, the sort of common sense way of thinking is that those are sort of external givens and we fit ourselves into them. And yes, we may be born into a world of thought, But that all had its origins in thinking. It wasn't that it was given and then we started thinking about it. It came from our thinking. So everything is based on habits of thought.
If it is so, and if you want to change something in society, change the world we live in, then we would first have to change our thinking, our worldview and our self-image, right?
Yes. Now, sometimes, let me qualify that. That is the direct way to make a change. Sometimes change comes because something is not working and people try to figure out how to do it differently, and then they find something else that works. But the most direct way to change and the most radical way, if we need radical change in the world, like many feel we do now with just the environmental emergency for one thing, economic problems and political problems also, but just taking the environment. There are many who feel, and I would agree, that it's not enough just to make changes in the social system and pass laws and so forth in order to value the environment and so forth. It really needs a change of consciousness, a different way of thinking of the earth. If we think of the earth in the same way we've been thinking of it, as something to use for our own benefit, and that's all, then even if we try to change systems, we'll somehow come back to the same result. And so for radical change, yes, a change of thinking is needed.
And this is my hope, that we will soon become aware of this simple fact that our present understanding of the world is destroying nature. That understanding, with all its tangled elements, materialistic scientific worldview, what we inherited from Christianity, the greed at the core of the economic system, all this, does Vedanta offer an alternative? How can it help us?
Yes, there are several ways, but central to the various ways that Vedanta can help. I deeply believe it can help, and that's why I've devoted my life to it. I obviously wasn't born into it. I came to it and felt that this is something that's deeply important. And over the 54 years that I've been living this life, that conviction has only gone deeper as I've seen more and more ways it is important. But central to all of the ways it's important is the concept of unity, or actually, more correctly, and we don't need, unless you want to, we don't need to get too philosophical, but actually the non-duality is the proper word for it, because if you have pure unity, if you have pure oneness, then the idea of oneness itself disappears, because one includes the idea of 2, 3, 4, 5. So when you have one, you have the other numbers. So if you get to a pure unity, it's actually a non-duality. That is, there are no two there. What it is becomes a silent but pregnant reality. So behind all of the thinking of Vedanta, there is this idea that there is this non-duality, or I'll use unity because it's an easier word for people. There is this unity which is the fundamental reality. And it's fundamental at all levels. It comes into play in understanding, why should I do unto others as I would have others do unto me, as the Bible, Christian Bible and the Jewish Bible say. Why should I do that? Is it just a nice sentiment, or because God wants me to do that, or because the Bible says I should do that? Well, if I don't care for the Bible, if I don't care for God, then I don't need to bother with it. But no, I do need to bother with it, because it's based on an actual reality, on an actual fact, an experiential fact. We may not be conscious of it now, but we're aware of it even now, of that unity. And I'll explain that in a moment, how it is that we are unconsciously aware of it. But it's the fact that there is a unity underlying all of the infinite variety in this universe that explains why I should do unto others as I would have them do unto me. It's because the other is not really other. And that is the basis of all morality in the Vedantic system. Morality is not based on the idea that God likes certain behavior and doesn't like other behavior, so he gives us a set of rules, do this and don't do that, because I like this and I don't like that. No, it's based on the fact that there is one reality, and whatever I do that hurts the outside is hurting me. What I do to hurt myself obviously hurts me, but what I do to hurt others, what I do to destroy the earth, it hurts myself because it is myself. One of the basic insights of modern environmental science is the interconnectedness of all things. And Vedanta says, yes, everything is interconnected. Why? Because it's all a manifestation of one thing. And that interconnectedness is an expression at the level of diversity of oneness. At this level, we see it as interconnectedness. I might like to get rid of all of the things I don't like in the universe, all of the mosquitoes, all of the flies, all of the insects, all of the snakes and everything else. If I could do that, the system would collapse, because everything has its part in the system. We're all related, and we're related because we're actually one at a higher level of perception. And so this idea of oneness is basic to the understanding of Vedanta, is basic to morality, is basic to social action, is basic to the idea of compassion. Why should I be compassionate? All religions say, be compassionate, be kind to others. Yes, that's good, and we should do that. But why? Because God likes it? I don't believe in God, so why should I do it? The Bible says it, or the Quran says it, or the Vedas say it. Well, if I don't believe in those, why should I do it? No, it's because there is this underlying oneness, which is the basis of why the law of karma works. Karma says that if I give out good, good tends to come back to me. If I give out evil, evil tends to come back to me. It's because the universe is my own reflection. It's my own self. I think that I stop right here, but why should I think I end where my skin ends? It's because I have identified with the body as myself. But I don't have just one sense. It's not just the sense of touch that I have. I have eyes, I have ears, in which I take in the whole universe. The sense of touch takes in the body, but the eyes, the ears have the potential for taking in everything. The whole perceptible universe is part of my own being. My body doesn't end where the skin ends. My body is the universal body, because a whole universe appears within my awareness. I realize that that's so contrary to our usual thinking that it sounds impossibly vague and impossibly abstract. But actually, through practice, through meditation and so forth, we gradually begin to sense this sense of continuity of our being. There's a meditation which I teach here in guided meditations of trying to feel a sense of unity pervading all things. And when you do that, you find after a little bit of effort that it's actually easy to feel that there is a sense of unity pervading everything. Why is that possible? And without practicing it, it sounds impossible. But if we do practice it, we find, and I've done it with many people, we find that it quickly is possible to feel a sense of oneness pervading everything. Why is that possible? Because we perceive it now. We just don't pay attention to it. Like a person wearing glasses gets so used to looking through the glasses at other things that you forget you're wearing the glasses. And I have done it, and I've seen many other people do it. Looking everywhere for the glasses when they're on their face. We're no longer conscious of it. And so this sense of unity is the background of all of our perception. How is it that I can see a whole cosmos with all of this variety? It's because of the screen of consciousness, which is the unifying factor, that all of this infinite variety I see is present within the field of consciousness, which is unitary. And so all of us have this perception of unity at the same time that we're having the perception of variety, but we're so used to focusing on variety that we forget the unity. It's that unity which gives place for, gives an explanation for morality, that unity which gives a sense of social cohesion. It's that unity which explains compassion. And all of that together is what, once we understand it, what directs us towards a better way of interacting and imaging or imagining society. If I understand that this unity is the basic reality of everything and everyone, and that I am that unity as everyone else is that unity, then I begin to feel a kinship with everything. Then even with material things, I begin to handle them differently. I handle them with respect, not throwing things this way and throwing things that way and breaking this and breaking that. I know, obviously, myself included, we all break things by accident, but I mean by on purpose. And so I begin to respect even material things because I feel the sense of unity pervading everything. And certainly I begin to respect other people and treat them differently. If someone comes to attack me and to do me harm, yes, I have every right to defend myself. If they come to harm someone else and I have the ability to protect that person, I should protect them from a person who's doing harm. But that being said, if I have this sense of unity, how do I think of that other person? Do I think of them as someone who is evil and has to be punished and made as miserable as possible? No. I may see that if this person is out to harm people, I have a duty to protect the innocent from them. So I may have to I may have to incarcerate or whatever with the person. But the way that I do that and the way that I think of the person is completely different. I'm not thinking of incarceration as I want to make that person as miserable as I can because he did this terrible thing. No, I'm protecting society from someone who is harming others and hasn't learned how not to harm others. But I give them the opportunity. I can't make them take it, but I give them the opportunity to learn a new way of dealing with people and with society. So this sense of unity, it would change if it became a part of our thinking. It would change our criminal justice system. It would change our economic system. It would change our political system. So many parts of our present society, the economic system, the judicial system, the criminal justice system, and so many other things, even education, they're based on the idea of competition rather than cooperation. And yes, there is a place for competition in life, and we play games because we enjoy the game of competition. But when competition is seen as the law of life, then it distorts everything. Rather than seeing cooperation, even in the animal world, you see cooperation is so important in the animal world. Why shouldn't it be important in the human world? It should be all the more important for human beings. So again, that sense of unity would change the nature of our social institutions. It doesn't mean that everybody will become angels, but it means that you see everyone as a potential Buddha. You see everyone as a potential illumined soul. And yes, they and I may not have been able to manifest it yet, but that's where they're headed. And that's what we should be striving for.
So people can change their way of thinking and thereby change their own lives. But how can society change? How can the whole society change its way of thinking?
Most people now accept the idea of relativity, the Einstein's relativity. Most people accept that quantum theory is basically true. Most people accept the idea that the universe is made out of atoms, which themselves are made out of subatomic particles, which themselves are states of energy, etc. But how many people have done the experimentation to actually understand what that means. How many people have studied relativity theory to actually understand what it means? How many people have deeply understood quantum physics? They're very, very few. And yet most people, if you ask them, they say, oh, yes, of course, I believe in relativity, I believe in quantum theory. They may not be able to express what it is at all, but they understand that it's true. Why? Because there are enough people in society who have understood it and who have found ways to utilize the truth of it, that others, the idea spreads in society and others accept it because it's just part of the thinking. And so what needs to happen for a change of consciousness is for there to be enough people who have understood it. You don't have to convince everybody. But there have to be enough people who have understood it and who have dedicated their lives to it, so that there's an inner transformation that has come. Their way of being, their way of thinking and so forth, their way of acting, very important. Their way of acting has become different. If enough people do that, then in time the benefit of it will be seen. Let me give I gave a scientific example. Let me give a religious example. In early Christianity, there were just a handful of early Christians. How did it spread? Was it because everyone realized that Jesus was God and so forth? No, what happened was that there were enough Christians, which meant very few compared to the number of people in society, but there were enough Christians whose lives had been transformed by this new ethic, by this new ideal, by this new way of thinking and living, that people began to notice that they were different. So like that, if enough people take up these ideas, it doesn't have to be many. Swami Vivekananda used to say, give me 100 people who are sincere to the bone, and that will be enough to change the world. That sounds impossible. And of course he meant utterly sincere, 100% sincere. But it doesn't take many. But it does take a certain seed quantity to begin the process of that spreading into society. And that's what I think we're beginning to see, little bits here and there where people are taking interest in spirituality as opposed to just formal religion, but taking an interest in spirituality. And I've seen that all over the world. Wherever I go, I find that there's some people who want experiential religion, not doctrines, not dogmas and so forth, but they want to go deep because they have a sense that there is something real and something deep which can be experienced and which is transformative. And so if that spreads, then that will be enough to change the world. And I'm convinced, time may prove me wrong, but I'm convinced that that's beginning to happen now. And that's where the society's good intersects with the individual's good. That again, the usual idea of spirituality is, well, just take care of yourself. And there's a truth to that. If I take care of myself, however, I am contributing to society, and that can't be forgotten. When Swami Vivekananda went to America, people were always saying, well, what good does all of this do to society? And so Swamiji says, well, truth is truth. Truth doesn't have to do good to anything. Truth is its own value. But it also will do good to society. That's not why you should pursue the truth. You should pursue the truth because it's the truth. But it will do the greatest good to society because, as he said, if a person even goes into a cave and closes himself up in the cave and transforms himself, that will radiate over the world and help many others because we are all connected. We're connected at the physical level because we all are parts of the same ocean of matter, but we're even more connected at the mental level. Our minds are whirlpools in the universal mind, the cosmic mind. We're all parts of the cosmic mind, which is how we can communicate. Whatever changes I make in myself, that begins to set up different wave pattern, so to say, speaking figuratively, of course, a different wave pattern in the ocean of the universal mind. If enough people again, even a relatively few number of people do that, because it's an idea based on a deeper truth. It's a truth which has great power. Again, the best thing that we can do for ourselves is personal transformation, but that also happens to be the best thing we can do for the world, because it will change our interactions with the world. It will change our relationship with the world. It will change the effect we have on the world. If we think in terms of how can I stop the war in Ukraine? How can I change the economic system of America to make it more just? How can I save the planet from ecological disaster? Well, it's impossible. I, Swami Atmarupanada, I can't do that. I can worry myself sick. I can go out and join all kinds of organizations and exhaust myself. And finally, what I've done is made myself a nervous wreck, and I haven't had much effect. But what I can do is to take care of myself. And in doing that, I'm taking care of the world also. And if enough people do that, then it will have a visible effect, as we've seen through history. When a powerful idea comes into society and it spreads, you can see from the historical record, you can see the changes that take place in society. And even those who don't naturally take an interest in those things, they are benefited also.
Let's assume that I have understood that it is good to change. How do I start?
The first thing, usually for most people, is to understand intellectually. That doesn't mean necessarily philosophically, because some people are intellectual in the academic sense. Other people are not at all academic, but feel things more than they think things. But either way, to get an understanding through thinking, the thinking process, or for getting a sense through feeling, not superficial sentimentality, but through deeper feeling of the truth of things, the truth that we were talking about, of unity and the divinity of all things, the spiritual nature of all things, etc., to get an understanding of that. Because normally our understanding or changing the understanding comes first, and for most of us. And as that understanding, as we get a deeper understanding and as we hold on to that understanding, it begins to activate the feelings also. That is, we begin to feel the truths of which we are convinced. Once we are convinced something is true, that I haven't yet experienced, but I'm convinced that it's true, then I should try to hold on to that truth and begin to mold my actions and reactions in tune with that truth. That eventually leads to perception. So in order to change such a deep-seated, habitual, instinctive almost thinking and perceiving, our ideas have to go deep. And so it's not enough just to say, well, I can understand intellectually that there's one reality. If I come to that conviction, if after thinking I come to that conviction that there is one reality, it's not enough just to have that as sort of a superficial idea. That has to go deep so that it becomes the foundation of my other thoughts and my actions and reactions in life. To do that, I have to go deep into the idea. I have to hold on to it. The ideas at present, which are underpinning the present day paradigm which rules society. Those are ideas which have gone deep into the human psyche. And again, as I said before, they become sort of instinctive. They're not even self-examined for most people. So we don't want to be unconscious. We want to be conscious of what it is that I think and what it is that I believe. But those ideas have to go deep enough so that they also begin to guide my behavior as the old paradigm guides people's behavior now. When we do that, we begin to see that our perception itself changes. And for those on a spiritual path, which I think will be those who change the paradigm. That happens through spiritual discipline. That is, through holding on to an idea that I have come to be convinced of, holding on to it until it begins to guide my actions and reactions. Through meditation, through affirmation, through, if one is more devotional, through prayer, through devotional exercises and so forth, so that it goes deep. So let me back up for a moment and say that in Vedanta, we're not afraid of doubt. We're not afraid of atheism, agnosticism, or any other way of thinking. And one should not take up any thought, like including a Vedantic thought, unless one is convinced it's true. So the idea of oneness, if one doesn't believe in it, then one shouldn't beat oneself over the head with the idea to convince oneself. But if a person examining the truth becomes convinced that this is true, though I don't yet see it, but now I can understand that this must be true, then to take it up and hold on to it until it becomes the center of our life and that which guides my actions and my reactions. Then inner transformation takes place. What in the classical Christian world, especially in the eastern part of Christianity, they call metanoia, the transformation of what in Western Christianity was often called conversion in the deep spiritual mystical sense, not conversion in the modern missionary sense, but the deep conversion, or in the Eastern Christianity, the metanoia. That's what's necessary, or what in the Buddhist world is called bodhicitta, the Mahayana Buddhist world, where one has become so deeply colored by a truth that it begins to transform the whole orientation of one's being. So that's what we need.
And that will automatically change our interaction with others, right? Moreover, if our relationships with people become more positive, more considerate, it will confirm that we are on the right path, which is quite important.
Yes, our actions and interactions do affect other people. And that we can even experiment with once we have taken up these ideas, become convinced of their truth, and begun to practice them. Something as simple as trying to, as a practice, not as a realization, but as a practice, trying to remember that everyone I interact with is a divine being, is the same reality which I am and which I'm trying to realize, that everyone is a being of light. If I hold on to that and I go into the store, and not in an emotional, sentimental, or externalized way, but just quietly, internally, if I try to remember that as I'm dealing with people in the store, the salesperson or the person at the checkout counter, I begin to see that their reactions with me are different from what they were before. Suddenly, someone who seemed to be very hard and bored with their work, there's a softness that comes to them in reaction to my interchange. And so I begin to see, yes, some people are less sensitive and some people may still be rude to us and things. That happens, of course. But in general, we'll begin to see that there's a change in our interaction with people. The other person may not know why, but we begin to see that they respond to us in a softer way than they did before. And that's just a little way of beginning to understand how the external world reflects my own internal world, that I do have an effect on the world. In fact, in a very real sense, each one of us is a teacher, because each one of us is modeling something for the outer world, good or bad or indifferent. And so when we change our inner attitudes, we begin to see that the attitudes of others towards us begin to change.
In the center of Western culture stands personality, individuality, the idea of I, but not of me as a compassionate belonging, as you have described, but of me a part of others, against others, in competition with others. It is a kind of me-first approach to the world. One of the central values of Vedic culture, well, actually of almost all other cultures except our Western culture, stands humility. Humility has a bad reputation in the West. We associate it with subordination, with losing. Is humility something we should learn?
Yes, but as with everything, we first have to understand what humility really means. Because, as you just said, in the West, humility has a bad rap. It's considered to be subordination, lowering oneself, debasing oneself. That's not humility. Humility doesn't mean, oh, I'm a terrible person, I'm no good. That is a soft form of egotism. Real humility should mean transparency, that I'm not setting myself up against others. It doesn't mean that I'm putting myself below others intentionally. It just means that I no longer feel. This may not sound connected to humility, but it is very much connected to real humility. I no longer feel threatened by the world, and so I don't have to impose myself on the world. Egotism is actually not a sign of inner strength, it's a sign of inner weakness. Carl Jung, one of his many great insights was that for the average person, we project outside the opposite of what we feel inside. And so a person who is very egotistical is actually a person who feels threatened. They have to impose themselves on the world in order to keep the world from imposing itself on them. And the person who has the submissive sort of humility that, oh, I'm no good, I'm a bad person, I'm worthless, and so forth, that person is one who's also afraid of the world, but they have learned that the best way of avoiding others' aggression is to crawl under the rug and hide their head. So both are two different forms of egotism. But real humility means being transparent, and I am what I am, and that's okay. I know what I know, and I don't know what I do, and I know what I don't know. I'm aware that I don't know everything, and that's okay. Both are okay. If I know something, I can say it. If I don't know something, I can say that too, that I don't know that. With inner development, I could say spiritual development, but inner development, one begins to feel comfortable wherever one is. One begins to feel, well, as one begins to feel a sense of expansion and a feel of a connection with the world, one begins to feel that the need to impose my personality is no longer there. I don't need to sell myself. I don't need to advertise myself. I'm not even concerned about the personality and so forth. It doesn't mean that I don't take care of myself. It doesn't mean that I don't have a sense of inner dignity. Yes, a spiritual person does have that, but it's not the type of dignity which is show for the world. It's a dignity which comes from being content and being unafraid of the world around. So humility is something that needs to be learned, but it first has to be understood that it really means being transparent. I don't have anything to hide. I don't have anything to impose. I am just who I am. And again, that sense of being connected to a larger reality, a oneness, an infinite reality, that brings that sense of transparency and that sense of I'm not limited to this, and this person that I've always thought that I am. I'm larger than that. And so I don't feel the necessity of always imposing this person, Swami Atmarupanada, on others.
There is also a very practical result of an attitude toward the world characterized by humility. One stops harming others and destroying nature in order to achieve benefits for oneself. simply because this is contrary to the inner feeling of a humble person. So humility is a virtue. Let's talk about virtues, about values. Is there such a thing as absolute values?
The great human virtues, where do they come from? What is their source? They are natural expressions of the illumined mind. For us, they are practices, they are aspirations. But for a person of illumination, it's the natural expression of that state. Truthfulness. I have no need to lie for a person of illumination because they live in the truth. They see and think only truth, and there's nothing to hide. Honesty, of course, associated virtue. Compassion, empathy, all of those things and others, they're the natural expression of illumination. For us, they're aspirations, they're practices. But for the illumined mind, they're an expression of what they are. So all of the great virtues that we commonly recognize, those are rooted in spiritual reality. When we understand that, we see much clearer the nature and the value of human virtues. Things like self-sacrifice. When you see extraordinary examples, like in America when there was a plane crash in I think it was in the Potomac, or maybe I forget whether it was in New York or Washington D.C. It doesn't matter. Plane crash in a river outside of either Washington D.C. or New York City. Wintertime, the water was frigid. The plane landed on the water, and the people were able to get out, but they were drowning in the cold water. And so, as they brought a helicopter and dropping ropes to pull people up with. Then this one man, he kept, when the rope would come, he would hand it to someone else, and then hand it to someone else, and hand it to someone else. Finally, because of the cold of the water, he succumbed, and he drowned himself, but after saving a number of other people. And so seeing that, everyone recognizes that, what a wonderful man. You had his own self-sacrifice. He saved many others, but he died. But why? It's good for other people, but it was terrible for him because he died. What was the benefit for him? That's our natural thought, because me first, again, I'm sure he helped a lot of other people, but what good did it do him? He ended up dead. He should have saved himself. Oh no, then we recognize that when I begin to feel connected to something larger, then I don't feel that this is more important than the other person. And so that ability to do an act of extreme self-sacrifice, that comes much more naturally, and it's quite understandable, because I see that I'm not losing anything, that my life is their life and their life is my life. It's something that only becomes understandable when we understand some of these deeper truths. Now, if a person like this man, whether he had understood it intellectually, probably not. There was no evidence of that. He was just an extremely good-hearted man. But it's believed in all religions, including Vedanta, that a person who can do that in a truly unselfish way, their self-sacrifice is rewarded with the perception of that higher connection. And if they're not feeling that, they can't even do it. Their first instinct is, let me grab the rope and get out of here. The rope will come back for others, but I've got to get out of here. But they've begun somehow, through feeling, through thinking, but most probably through feeling, that my life is in them also, and so let me give them the rope. They're not thinking that everybody's watching, and so I want people to think I'm a hero. That can't come. It comes because there's, from the feeling level or the perceptual level or the not intellectual level, it has to come from a feeling or a perceptual level. One begins to see that by saving them, I'm saving myself. Not this body, but my real self.
What this example shows is that the virtues and values are inherent in man. So the goal would be to get deep enough into one's own nature, own being.
Yes, exactly. According to the Vedantic thought, we haven't completely forgotten our real nature. That is there. That's what drives us in life. That's the driving motivation in life. Freud thought the driving motivation in life was sex. Marx thought the driving motivation in life was economy. For the ordinary person, there's truth to both points of view. They were actually seeing something and understanding something. But there's a deeper motivation, and that which is behind both of those, and that is the attempt to get back to our true nature. And so, yes, those virtues of the enlightened mind, they haven't been completely forgotten. They're still in seed form within us, and they are what motivate us to do things which seem to be against our egocentric self-interest. Acts of kindness, acts of compassion, acts of self-sacrifice. It's because, and the more a person has begun to access that, what's traditionally called purification of the heart or whatever, then the more that becomes present. And that's why we see, even among people who have no apparent religious inclination, spiritual inclination, we find very, very good people. People often ask, well, some of the atheists I know are much better than many of the religious people I know. Well, yes, that's why we don't need to be afraid of atheism or whatever. These truths are inherent in the human heart, and they come out in their own way. The deeper virtues are there in seed form within everyone, because the enlightened mind is there within everyone.
There is an important point to this. The virtues, the goodness, exist in us in the seed form, but the world we live in, the culture we are born into, can either help us or make it difficult for us to let these seeds germinate, the sprouts grow. It seems to me that we need a different environment for our growth, don't we?
Foundational in Eastern thought, not just Vedantic thought, but in all of Eastern thought, is the wave-like nature of everything in the universe, that everything happens, there's a rise and there's a fall, there's a rise and there's a fall. And so we see that through history, that there are golden periods and then there are dark periods. Then there's another golden period and another dark period. There are periods when there's a rise in spirituality, when there's a rise in natural goodness of people. And then there are periods which, again, there's a rise in violence and negative qualities of human society. Of course, that means that there are times which are very propitious, times which are conducive to the growth of these ideas. My own belief, which time may prove it right or wrong, my own belief is that we are entering a time when these values will begin to grow. One of the reasons for that is, not the only, but one reason for that belief is that times have become so dark now. And there's so many things so many elements of human civilization which seem on the brink of collapse. Just as our human body has its own immune system that fights disease, all of us go through periods of sickness, and then we go through periods where of greater health, because the body has an immune system to preserve itself. There's a will to live within the body itself. Within the system itself. And so in society, there seems to be a social will to live, a will to survive also, which after a period of great decline, then inevitably there's either final destruction, which we haven't seen yet, or a period of a rise in the conditions of society. And I can't, maybe it's just my hopeful thinking, but I don't think it is. I can't help but think, as I look around society, seeing little seeds sprouting everywhere in society of hopeful signs of a new way. People, whether it's through environmentalism, which for many younger people now is the movement that inspires them. As when I was a youngster, it was spirituality, and during the hippie movement, the idea of a new spiritual movement in society. which inspired me and many others. Nowadays, environmentalism is something which is inspiring many young people. So whatever the movement is, where you see around the world that there are many people looking for a new way forward. And that, to me, is a very hopeful sign. That, yes, just looking at the present moment, things are pretty dark. But the signs of growing light are there also. And so I think it's a time when we will begin to see changes, slowly at first, but they will grow until they're more visible to everyone. And I should say one of the other reasons I believe that is that one of my great inspirations, Swami Vivekananda, he believed that. He believed that there was a great spiritual awakening that was coming to the world, that it would take a couple of centuries or something for it to become visible to the common people, but that it was coming. And so anyway, that's my hope.
On the way to understanding, to love, to light, one advances more quickly if one gets off the train of modern hectic life and takes the path of practical spirituality, which at first glance may seem unspectacular. The path itself is the reward. I spoke with Swami Atmarupanada, a monk of the Ramakrisha Order, about how change can take place in our personal lives, but also in society. My name is Andreas Stanowski, and I'm the publisher at Continental Verlag in Germany. Have a look at our books. Maybe you will find something that interests or delights you. Let's stay in touch.